Hey everybody, this is Andrea Jenson from the Cashflow CFO, and you're listening to the Cashflow CFO Podcast, the show that explores the financial side of running a business for people who want to maximize profitability and scale with confidence. If you want to make smart financial decisions based on data and put more of your hard-earned profits into your pocket, this is the podcast for you. This episode of the Cashflow CFO podcast is brought to you by the Cashflow CFO. Did you know that on average, business owners have up to 84% of their personal net worth tied up in their business? Our virtual CPAs and CFOs, as well as accounting and bookkeeping experts, empower business owners just like you to make big leaps that help them maximize profitability and scale with confidence. Visit thecashflowcfo.com for more information, and thank you for listening. Hey everyone, it's Andrea, and our guest for today is Greg Gosman. For the past 14 years, Greg has been at the helm of his successful tax firm, helping businesses thrive with his expertise and strategic insights. With a robust educational background that includes a degree in finance, accounting, and management from Ohio University and a Master's of Science in Taxation from DePaul University, Greg has built a diverse client base ranging from small, owner-operated businesses to large manufacturing firms, spanning nearly every industry. What sets Greg apart is his commitment to being more than just a tax preparer. He's a consultative, strategic partner who's dedicated to helping his clients navigate the complexities of business with a focus on their long-term success. And on the personal side, Greg has been married for 6 years, has 2 daughters, ages 5 and 2, and he enjoys traveling, outdoors, wine, and sports. I love it. We're going to have a lot to talk about with that. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thanks, Andrea. Pleasure, and thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to chat with you. And I know that for small business owners, tax is always, something that they're always wondering, am I doing it right? Am I missing things? How can I make it better? So I think we're going to have a great conversation today and really, kind of peel back behind the curtains of what you as a tax preparer see, opportunities, and maybe we can even share with our listeners some ways, some tips or tricks that they can, maybe not tricks, because there's when it's tax, right? It's very bland, but there are ways that you can strengthen that relationship with your tax preparer so that they know you and your business better. And I'm sure you're going to tell us all about this, but that helps you do your job better, which means they get a better result when it comes to tax strategy, paying tax bills, all of those things that, keeps a lot of business owners up at night wondering and worrying about. So love to dive into that with you, Greg. Let's start off. Tell me a little bit, how did you get into this industry?
For sure. So I don't know why, but I was always drawn to numbers. That was always my thing. And I was also always drawn to how can I create opportunity to explain or work with people who are skilled at doing something, but not skilled at certain pieces of that world, where it may be business, where it may be tax. That consultative thought partner thing is something that I think separates me and is something that I really hang my hat on. A lot of people look for vendors, right? They look for a software vendor. They look for a meeting vendor, whatever it may be. But they also don't look for anybody on the consultative thought partner side outside of certain professions, right? Attorneys, right? I have lots of clients who have come to me over the years who their previous experience with a tax preparer has been in January or February. We send all of our docs. They prepare a return. They send me a bill, and that's the end until next year. I have clients like that too. I don't force people to engage, but I don't enjoy those types of clients, right? I want the clients that engage, that want to learn more, that want to talk about how they can better profit margins, how they can lower their tax or how they can limit their tax. The one thing that I always talk about whenever I have any of these opportunities is you spend more time trying to figure out via Yelp or Google where you're going to eat pizza than you do where you're going to hire a professional. You either find them through somebody that you know and you don't do any due diligence and it could be a bad person, or you engage with them so little that it doesn't matter. And the pizza is more important to you than the financial advice or anything else. So what I've always tried to do is be everything to everybody. And I've tried to really make it to a world where you get what you need out of a relationship, right? TurboTax and all these softwares have effectively made people believe that it's dummy proof. And that's certainly not the case, because what you don't learn out of that is how to read the output, right? You don't look at a 1040. You click a bunch of boxes, you miss things. H&R Block has a very successful ad campaign where they guarantee you a bigger refund than you could get yourself. What people don't know about tax is just a complex math problem. 2 plus 2, if you do it, or if an MIT doctor of mathematics does it, is still 4. That's the same thing with tax. I've been in the business for 25 years. And if I do your return and you do your return having no knowledge, we're going to get to the same place, provided we all follow the rules. That's the difference, right? H&R Block is successful because they know you don't know the rules as a consumer. And so those are the things that I kind of anchor myself to when I think about, how do I build the business? Why did I build the business? And why do I want to be in this business? It's one of the more impactful things that you can do. It's unique because you can be 300% better than somebody else in the profession, right? If you are choosing to use Google Meets or Zoom, sure, there are small nuances. It's not going to change the way your business operates. Hiring the appropriate professional can change the way that your business operates. And I think that's one of the keys. And I think that's what drove me to it. I was never going to be a doctor. I was never going to be a scientist. But I figured this was an opportunity to help people and to give back to small businesses and communities.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too, finding a financial professional with a heart of service is always, it's difficult to find, because a lot are so smart and they're in their head and they're just, crunching the numbers, and they don't want to talk. They don't want to get to know you. They don't want to know your, how your business and your personal and the intersection and the overlap of all of those decisions that you make on both sides,
Sure.
As a business owner, are going to affect down the road the outcome of your tax situation or exposure to things that you don't even know you're getting yourself into. So I love that. And I think that that's so very important. And your analogy on the pizza and the tax preparer or a financial professional, I think a lot of business owners, they are a little bit intimidated by financial components of their business. So if that's not, if they're a creative, or they're, if you had to rank all the things you do in your business and love, a lot of business owners, that's at the bottom of the list. And so they just kind of schlep it off to the corner. And really, what we spend a lot of our time trying to help them to understand when we have the opportunity to support them is that this piece intersects every other piece that you love in your business. And if you got this piece right, you'd get to do more of all of the things that you love. And so really just kind of showing them, it's not scary. Let me turn on the flashlight and show you, because the output, like you said, Greg, the output is so important, right?
It's interesting to me when you think about people's relationships with their accountants or their financial professionals. You run this vast gamut of no interaction, no engagement, because they're going to charge me by the hour, to these people that constantly text or email about every little portion of their life. And one thing that I've always hung my hat on, and what's important to me, is that these are not just tax returns. These are not just financial statements. These are people with kids and futures and other things. And so I always knew that I wanted to get into the business of helping people plan for the future. And how could they be better at that? A lot of people have built very successful businesses by being really good in that particular industry. That does not necessarily translate to the financial acumen. That does not necessarily translate to a tax return. So what I've always tried to do is I've always tried to make sure that I open myself up to the ability to teach. I've been a part-time college tax professor now going on 16 years. I enjoy that because I like teaching. And what it's also taught me is how to be better at all other aspects of the business, because I know the way that I talk to you is different than the way that I talk to client B or C or D, because everybody learns or has an appetite for learning in various forms and fashions. And if I can explain something to you very high level and that's all you want to know, that's wonderful. Then I have another client who wants to know all the nuances and ins and outs. I have to go deeper. I have to structure the conversation a little bit differently. And then you have the third basket who don't care, just want to get it done. And that's okay too, because that's where their heart is. But for me, it's the important part of being aligned with a client and making sure they can go to sleep at night, not having to worry about, is the IRS going to call me next week or send me a note next week asking for financial statements or an audit or something else. It's also educating the client that these things aren't awful. These things aren't scary, right? I've had thousands of audits that we've been through in 25 years, have never lost. That doesn't mean that I'm really great at my job or that I'm better than somebody else, but that means that I'm taking positions that are defensible. And oftentimes, especially now with everybody e-filing, it's really easy for the IRS to pull your return and ask for more information because they just basket you electronically with everybody in your peer group. So if you are a business that has $3 million of top line revenue, they'll basket you with the other people with $3 million of revenue. And then they'll start matching percentages. Did they claim that they spent the same on advertising as peer groups? So it's really easy to ask. That doesn't mean you're wrong for not being in those baskets. That just means that you have to be able to understand what's going on. So I hang my hat on a lot of my client communication with the teaching background, right? It's easier for clients to ask questions when you're open and honest with them. It's easier when you take that approach to explain certain things to them because they don't feel dumb, right? It's really easy in a world to feel dumb. When I go see my doctor and they say something to me that I don't understand, that doesn't make me dumb. That makes me not a doctor. And it's the same thing when you're in the accounting field. You know, when you guys do financial statements for clients or when I'm doing tax work, it's really easy to think about that stuff. And so communication I found is very key. I also find that when you make a client comfortable, that it's not this legal world of I'm going to bill you in 6-minute increments. And if you ask me a question that's yes or no, I'm immediately going to an admin assistant saying, mark them down for 3 minutes and bill them. Those are things that are not part of my experience with my clients. What I want to do is I want to make sure we're aligned in what you think is fair fees wise, but also what you expect. And the one thing that I always start with any client that's referred to me is, why are you leaving your previous firm? Why are you leaving your previous professional? Because the one red flag that I always have is if somebody says they're charging me more, I'm trying to get somebody who will do it for $1 less. That's not a client that I want, because that client's going to give me a million things to do and they're not going to take feedback and they're just going to look at billable hours before we even get to a semblance of relationship. The clients that I want are the ones that, hey, they don't explain things well. We've had a very successful 6 years. I don't know if we're doing anything correctly. Those are the clients that I want to work with, and those are the clients that I want to build relationships with.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because there is always, especially with all of the technology and AI, there's always somebody that you can get cheaper. But, right. One of my mentors, a quote he said, and it just resonated to my core. It only hurts when you pay for quality once.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And, the thought that I've always had on that too is there are a lot of people who have been with a tax preparer for 30 years. And I would tell you that my experience, having purchased those smaller firms, having dealt with people retiring and transitioning books of business, a lot of times that's somebody who is doing a tax return in front of a TV or dinner once a year. They're not engaging, they're not strategically thinking, and they're not planning. That's not a knock on them. That's just a different way of life and a different level of service. And so when you go and you compare and somebody calls me and says, hey, Greg, I've got a business return, I've got 2 personal returns, I want to do a bunch of financial planning, and by the way, I have my current guy charging me $300, there's just really no fit there, because you're probably not getting the level of service you believe that you're getting, first off. Right. And second off, what do you want to do and how do you want to make this work? So for me, it's always that level of service, and also acknowledging that sometimes it's not the right fit for a client. And I'll tell clients all the time, I've never lost a client for billing or fees. I have had many relationships that haven't started because I've been very candid that says, And if the level of service you're looking for is probably not right here, you can go and do something cheaper. God bless you, and let's move on, and we'll figure it out. And if later your needs change, let's talk again. But for me, it's really finding that right fit and building relationships. My book of business, I don't advertise. I don't spend a ton of money on social or anything else because I don't want the random Yellow Pages call from somebody that is going to be a big headache without being able to have a consultative conversation. My book of business is almost 100% referral. Either you know somebody, either you came from somebody, or they've helped you find me. And those are the conversations that I like because that means that I'm doing my job. If one person tells two other people, hey, this guy's been really great for us, that's more important to me than a bunch of clicks on a Facebook ad that are now asking me to do a bunch of things. Sight unseen. Sight unseen is the best. Yeah. We don't want to show you our tax return, but we want to know how much you would charge me to do it.
Start scaling with confidence today. The Cashflow CFO is a full-service accounting and fractional CFO firm. So it goes without saying that our financial experts are phenomenal at number crunching. But more than that, they are expert communicators who will connect all those complicated financial dots in a way that just makes sense. We don't wait in the wings and check in every so often either. With our boutique approach, we position ourselves front and center, watching over every dollar that comes in and out of your business as if it was our own. So if your business is making money and you're ready to take it to the next level, but you're not sure you completely understand your numbers, and you're looking for that trusted guide to help you build a roadmap to reach your financial goals, it sounds like we would be a great fit. Visit thecashflowcfo.com and let's get started empowering you to build and scale your business the way you want to today.
I think that's a really important thing to point out. So for business owners who have a tax preparer now, right, you want to be engaging all throughout the year, right? At the minimum, send quarterly financial statements so that they can see. Nobody wants to have surprises come tax time. And that will help to prevent that from happening, number one. But number two, they're able to look at it and say, hey, did you see XYZ? And the business owner is so busy in the day-to-day and their to-do list and their team to manage and their deliverables to get out. Having that second set of eyes is just such an important piece of that whole puzzle that they're putting together that is their business, which is the biggest asset. Most likely, right? I can confidently say that as a business owner, your business is the biggest asset that you will own in your lifetime. And so I don't think that enough business owners think of it that way, and they don't treat it that way because that asset needs to appreciate. That asset needs to have transferable value. And let me tell you, when you go to transfer that business, whether you're selling it, you're being acquired, you're whatever might be the case, what's the first thing they're going to ask you for? Tax returns, financials.
That's exactly right.
And so you have to this is the way that you're, being a good steward of your business is by having, a partner that can make sure that you're doing things the right way at the right time. And, cost aside, that it's such a wide gamut of pricing, for tax returns and things like that. But just look at it as this is a way that you're protecting your asset. You're improving the value of your asset. Your tax return, a lot of times, and I know you see this, we see this all the time, their financial statements and their tax return don't match.
Yep.
Because things have happened over time. And a lot of the financial softwares, you're able to go back and make changes to a period that's, a historical period, a year that's closed and passed, and you've already filed the tax return on it. So kind of off on a different note there, but just something to be, completely aware of and keep an eye out for.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing that you mentioned there is kind of the timing and making sure that you're kind of as plugged in as you can be, right? I'll inevitably every February or thereabouts, I get a referral from somebody and that client comes and has a business and I look and I'm like panicking over their financials and the shape of their financials. And now I've got to give them, a 30-page punch list on things that I need before I can even discuss fees or path forward. And everybody always says the same thing. Well, it was good enough for a previous preparer. And that conversation is fine, but when you miss out on all kinds of things, and if you don't come to somebody until after the close of the year, there's no planning that can take place. There's no conversation, right? I do some of the most critical work with my clients between Thanksgiving and the end of the year, because that sets us up for what the tax return will look like. If you start doing that in January, I cannot give you a bonus. I cannot give you additional withholding on that bonus. We cannot likely create a retirement plan or any of these additional things. I also wonder how some people manage the business day to day without having accurate financials on a monthly or quarterly basis. And I'm sure you see that in your world way more than I do. For me, it becomes, even when you think about random QuickBooks based stuff, what's this? Well, it's been there for 4 years. You didn't think to ask? Like, how do we have a conversation around, all right, now I've got to strip it down. Now I've got to go back 4 years, year by year. And now it's going to be all this work to unravel something that we just physically didn't ask about during the period of time. And also, as I'm sure you're well aware of, as time elongates, we forget what half of this stuff is. So now I can go back in your documents. I can find an old tax return that's been prepared, likely through poor financial statements. And now we've got to unravel this big mess. So from my perspective, I think oftentimes it's fear driven. Somebody who owns that business knows what they're manufacturing. They know their product. They may even have the financial acumen to know all about their profit margins and cost and everything that goes into it. But they see a financial statement and they get nervous, right? All they look at is cash in bank. Oh, that looks right. The rest must be okay. From my perspective, that's why the education piece, I think, is so interesting for me. I don't frame it that it's so important, because if it's not important to the client, I don't want to make it important. I'll do my best to explain why it's important, but I'm also not going to force you to do your homework. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting to me because I think that's the part that helps you anchor to what needs to change and why there is different levels of success. How can somebody else do this better than I can do it? Well, it's through education, preparation, and being able to work through those things. So from my perspective, I always want to make sure that my client is not only getting everything that they need, but that they're getting everything that they also want or desire. And if they don't need those things, we don't sell them. There's not going to be an upsell. There's not going to be a charge for things that you don't feel are value adds. But I will explain to you why you probably should do that and why you need that, right? One of the biggest misses that I see with respect to small businesses are typically these are people who complain that bigger businesses have tax loopholes. First off, there's always going to be loopholes. But taking depreciation expense is not a loophole. If you have fixed assets, you as a small business owner are entitled to depreciation, just like the person that owns $1 billion manufacturing company. The dollars and the amounts will be different just based on scale and size, but that's not a loophole. So when you talk about loopholes and you talk about, offshore strategy and all these other things, sure, there are going to be things that don't work within the realm of a small business. But other things like properly planning for retirement and making sure that your profit sharing plan is structured, these are things that will minimize the tax that you have to pay in every current year, but will also benefit you later in life and will add value. It'll either help you acquire better levels of employees, should you need that, by giving them additional benefits like a profit sharing plan, but they'll also help you put away for what your future life looks like. And, it's unfortunate, but we live in a world where I can't tell the next generation that they're going to be able to retire on Social Security. Who knows if that's going to be there or if it won't be? It's been poorly managed by both sides politically. So we have to start planning for ourselves. And, every small business owner loves to think about that windfall that's going to come when they sell the business. But have you thought about that succession planning? What if it's not there? What if your kids don't want to run your business? So it's those things that I think are worth discussing. And I think a lot of people don't want to have those discussions. First, they fear the unknown. And second, they don't want to feel like they're weak. They don't want to talk about something they're not comfortable talking about. But that's why you hire good professionals, right? To have those conversations. And no professional should ever make somebody feel stupid or make somebody feel incapable or incompetent. That's why I hone my communication skills. And that's why I know that I can talk to you in a certain fashion. I may not be able to talk to client B in that fashion because they'll stop talking or they'll stop engaging. So that's a super important, to me, critical piece of the client and firm relationship.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Couldn't agree more. And I think that, when we look at, here's some takeaways from this conversation, right?
Sure.
It's have a tax professional that is doing planning and tax preparation, and be in communication regularly, at least quarterly. Check in. Here's what's going on. Does this still match up with what we had, talked about as far as the strategy for what I'm doing? And then share with them your goals, right? For all of, you might own several businesses, or you might have rental properties or things like that. Share with them, what's my 1, 3, 5, 10-year idea of what I want to do with these assets, because they're going to help you to understand and find the best way to do that. What are some other takeaways that you would share with our listeners?
So I think the most important thing is the initial decision when you start a business in terms of entity structure. It's really easy to fall by the premise of, I just want legal liability protection and I don't want to be audited. There's many different ways you can do it. So when we think about entity selection or entity structure, everybody's so equipped mentally with this. I can Google it, and I have a client who, when they were setting up their business prior to meeting me, they were like, I created all this. I Googled all this stuff, and here's what it tells me to avoid in the state of Pennsylvania. And I'm like, well, okay, but that's just like Googling medical conditions, right? It's always going to give you the worst case scenario. You have a runny nose. It could be brain cancer. Come on. Sure, it could be, but likelihood is you have a cold, right? And so when we think about entity selection, everybody's aware of LLCs. They've been widely used because of the flexibility that it gives you. But a lot of people don't understand that there's differences even amongst LLCs, right? If you have only one participant and you're a single member LLC, you're not going to file a separate tax return. That return is going to go on Schedule C of your personal return. That's not a bad thing. The LLC gives you liability protection and you're okay from that perspective. But what it does potentially open up is, if they audit your LLC, are they now auditing your personal return because it's not a separate return? Are you able to take benefits between self-employment tax and non-self-employment tax income? We don't know until we think about that. There are S Corps, there are C Corps, there are all these different things. And everybody's so focused on the LLC, very flexible, very good structure, but we have to think about it. Do you have a partner? Do you want to engage your spouse in this as a minority owner or minority member? How do we set those things up? And this is, again, the thing of, well, I talked to an attorney, they told me this. Like, okay, they'll tell you from a liability perspective, but if they're not focused on accounting or tax, you're likely not getting the full picture of it. So I think setting up the business first in the appropriate fashion is the biggest piece. Also, selecting an accounting method is critically important, right? When we talk about selecting an accounting method, the only thing most people know if they are new business owners is the cash method, because as individuals, we're all cash method, right? Cash method is very basic. You deposit money, it's revenue. You write a check, it's an expense. But there's the accrual method, which a lot of businesses have to be just dependent upon what vertical they're in or based on certain revenue limits or receipts limits. And when you think about that, when you provide your first tax return to the IRS, you just select your accounting method. You mark it on a box. It's very easy. If you have to change it, it can be a real pain in the behind because you have to fill out a change of accounting method form. You have to apply for it. The government can deny it. These are all things that people don't think about because you always think you're going to, first off, most people think they're going to always be a small business, or they think they're going to make billions of dollars. And in reality, everybody's somewhere in the middle, right? The thresholds of success when you dream about them are pretty crazy. But so making sure you have the appropriate entity structure and the appropriate accounting method, those are the two biggest things at the outset. The next biggest mistake that people make is the lack of outside assistance. And what I mean by that is surrounding yourself with appropriate professionals that can help you make decisions. Get yourself a good attorney. Get yourself a good accountant. Get yourself a good tax preparer. And now people will always say, accountant, tax preparer, those are not two different things. But in reality, they are. What I'm doing and the level of service I'm providing, you don't want to pay me to prepare your financial statements. You don't want to pay me to do bookkeeping. First off, there are people way better equipped to do it. And second off, you don't want to pay my hourly rate to do those things. I do it for some clients because they don't want to look for somebody else. I do it for some clients because they don't want to go elsewhere and they're willing to, eat the cost. But that's not the benefit to the client. The benefit to the client is finding somebody who's competent at those things where that's their core business. Hire, if you're not ready for a full-time CFO because your business could benefit from one, but you don't need it, hire somebody like your firm. Hire your firm for bookkeeping. Hire somebody like me for tax services. Find an attorney that specializes in what you do. I think oftentimes we fall into this thought of, well, they're expensive. Well, they're expensive because they add value, right? And to me, the biggest thing is getting what you need out of them so that everything is set up appropriately on the front end, because it will save you a lot of time and heartache going forward. I think the next biggest mistake that people make is not understanding the output with which they get results. If they don't know how to read a financial statement, if they don't know how to read a tax return, you end up in this world where you're getting value because you're in compliance with whatever you need. And you have a financial statement you can give to a banker to qualify for a loan. The IRS doesn't call you or doesn't email you because they have your tax returns. But if you don't know how to read those things, that could lead you to, bigger problems later. So I think that's one of them. And then for me, I think making sure you understand some of the nuances. What's deductible versus what isn't. I have a lot of clients that don't understand really basic things with respect to personal expenses versus business expenses and how you bifurcate them. When you have business credit cards and it's all business, there's likely no help that you need. But a lot of my clients also pay for things personally that is business related. How do you make sure you're getting the benefit of that deduction? If you've got a tax preparer who's not consulting with you and simply taking your books and records, you could be leaving tens of thousands of dollars of deductible expenses on the table simply because if I look at your QuickBooks, I assume they're complete. Now I ask, but there are people that don't ask, and there are people that, well, frankly, don't care. If you don't ask and if it's not in there, it's gospel, right? I've done my requirements for my CPA license and everything else. I'm not auditing your books. I'm not auditing your records. I'm taking the financials you've given me. You've told me they're complete. Here's your tax return based on those. I've ticked the box if I just want to leave it at that. That becomes one of the bigger things, right? And the most common place I see it are twofold, and they're the wild opposites. The first is financial statements with all of your personal expenses on there, right? Well, why are you paying, the electricity at your home through the business account? And why are we not taking that out through distributions? You could do it that way, and you can have it as a personal basket or a non-deductible basket. Why are we not doing it? But the more important side is the other side. And that's more of a compliance side, right? If we take those and we can't defend them when we get audited, we're going to have a big adjustment. We're going to end up paying penalties and interest. And then the other side is, I've got all these expenses that I paid on my personal card because you know what? It's easier to pull out my Amex when I get gas on the way to a client than it is to remember to use the business card or whatever else. Just making sure all of those get to where they need to be. Those probably end up being your biggest baskets of things that impact every business from large to small. And then there's obviously the other nuances, right? Making sure you understand industry standards, making sure you have somebody who can help you with case law or prior tax law. Somebody in your space has been sued by the IRS for something, I'm sure. Do you have a professional who can help you with that? Or do you assume it doesn't impact me, so I don't have to worry about it?
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think those are all really great points and tips. And Greg, this conversation has been so full of value. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and experience. If our listeners want to learn more about your services, how can they get in touch with you?
Very easy. Just email me. It's simply gregory@g2wm.com. Email me with questions. Glad to help if I can. Email me with, wanting to work with me or doing anything else. My relationship with Andrea has been, I think, going on like 3 years now. Yep. Of helping and being one of the preferred partners with respect to the tax work. whatever I can do to help. If it's something easy, go ahead and email me and I'll give you an answer, and we don't have to worry about going too deep. And if it's something where you feel like you need additional help or there's conversation to be had, reach out and let's talk about how we can work together and how we can make life a little bit easier for you from a tax perspective.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Greg. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I know I did, and I'm sure that our listeners did as well. So thank you for being a guest on our show today.
It was great. Thanks, Andrea. And if there's ever anything else or any topics that you want to talk about, I'm certainly glad to jump in again. Thanks for the time and hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and review, and we'll catch you on the next episode. If you're looking for more content or resources in the meantime, check out our website for information, blogs, and our I've Got a Spreadsheet for That series. That's thecashflowcfo.com. Again, thecashflowcfo.com. We can't wait to hear from you.